And of course, one notable part of that report from Josh, the impacts that the tariffs are expected to be having across our country. It's expected to be felt across the country, but especially here in Michigan, where companies like DTE Energy rely on Canada for trade. However, right now they say customers should see minimal impacts on their bills. In fact, take a look at your screen. We have a statement right there from the company saying, in part, our buying strategy and unique geography in Michigan allow us to purchase and store natural gas ahead of when our customers need it to help mitigate pricing concerns. DTE says it gets most of its natural gas from Michigan and other parts of the United States. Well, you know, this is a big car state. Car prices are expected to skyrocket due to the tariffs. But the United Auto Workers aren't condemning the restricted trade. In a statement, the UAW saying, quote, "For 40 years, we've seen devastating effects of so-called free trade on the working class. Tariffs are a powerful tool in the toolbox for undoing the injustice of anti-worker trading deals. We are glad to see an American president take aggressive action on ending the free trade disaster." There's been a lot of talk about these tariffs disrupting the economy, but if corporate America chooses to price gouge the American consumer or attack the American worker because they do not want to pay their fair share, corporate America bears the blame for that decision. The UAW goes on to say it's in negotiations with the Trump administration about their plans to shape auto tariffs in April. So we did speak with Brian Long, a professor at Grand Valley State University. He says it will be very complicated for car parts that travel across the border multiple times during production. Take a listen.
Well, obviously, economists don't like tariffs. We like free trade. Ever since David Ricardo wrote his book over 200 years or over 100 years ago, we have said tariffs are not the way to either raise money or to control an economy. However, up until about 100 years ago, before the income tax, tariffs were one of the major revenue generators for not only the United States, but most other countries. They also used tolls, as in toll booths, but it wasn't until the income tax came in and later the corporate income tax that we began to rely on other things for revenue. Today, of course, uh, I was disappointed to see the tariffs implemented. I think to a certain extent, there was a lot of people that thought that he really wouldn't do this because it's not good for the economy. However, the president is trying to get some kind of concessions out of not only Canada but Mexico, apparently beyond the things that he has stated, which is help on the border, controlling illegal immigration, and the fentanyl running into the country. My worst fear is that the president actually thinks that this is a good source of revenue because it is not.
I actually wanted to ask about the impact on the economy. What can these type of tariffs do on our current economy, and will it further issues in terms of like paying for stuff in the future for people and their households?
Well, if you look at the consumer price index, 40% of it is housing. And the implementation of tariffs is not going to have much of an impact there, but it will on many of our industrial commodities, particularly aluminum, copper, and timber that we get from particularly Canada. And other commodities of that sort are important to the industrial market. The biggest problem for Michigan is that we have so much business going back and forth over the Ambassador Bridge every day in automotive that it's hard to keep track of it. Somebody said to me that a steering wheel, the basic steering wheel, goes back and forth across the bridge several times before it's finally assembled into a permanent assembly that it ends up in the production line. If these things have to be taxed, if they are held up, it's going to limit production, both for Canada and for us. Needless to say, a number of the cars that are built today do come from Canada. And the tariff that has been proposed and that is apparently being implemented will be devastating as far as those particular lines of cars are concerned. We just don't believe that this is a viable way to go forward in the future, but we're assuming that the president is trying to extract some concessions of some sort other than tariffs from the other parties, both Mexico and from Canada.
Do you know how much people may have to pay extra because of these tariffs? Is there like a number out there already?
Well, if you take the cars that are built over there, the presumption is it's going to be 100% of the tariff, which is 25%, the last numbers that I looked at. Needless to say, people aren't going to buy that same car from Canada for another 25% more, and they'll have to shut down their production line. But as I said before, I don't think a lot of people thought that the president was really going to go through with this, although he does have a reputation of being the president that does do what he says he's going to do. And that seems to be what's upon us right now. I am waiting to see some kind of a statement as to exactly what he's looking for. The other thing that I'm sure is happening right now is that there's a whole bunch of cross border talk going on between people that we don't know and that we don't see. When Trudeau got on the plane and flew down to meet with the president, there was an agreement already in place before he got on the plane. This is the case with most major treaties, I might add. The presidents of the respective countries show up to sign it, but it's all been worked out in advance by people that we just plain don't see. The exception to that would be Henry Kissinger, where one day, after doing a whole bunch of behind the scenes stuff, we put Henry Kissinger up in the front row. But there's others like that as we're speaking right now that are talking.
You talked about the, I guess, day-to-day things that will be impacted for people buying. Will it be groceries? Will it be gas? What can we see an increase in price for us?
Well, particularly if I'm worried about production lines shutting down, particularly in the case of automotive. Michigan trades more dollars with Canada than most other states. Obviously, New York trades with Canada across that border, and then there's Vancouver, Washington, where there's trade across the border. But for us, automotive, because of the North American Free Trade Agreement from 30 years ago, we started doing a whole bunch of business across the border, back and forth and back and forth, because we had presumably taken care of this tariff problem. Digging into it, there are some things that are not fair as far as the Canadian side of the ledger is concerned. And this is what the president may be addressing. But we're hoping that this threat that has now been implemented doesn't last for more than a few days before there's a solution. If it goes beyond that, I am worried about the state of the Michigan economy.
And so, I mean, can you say how bad it could get here in Michigan if this does go on for a number of days?
I honestly don't know because the supply chains have become so convoluted. The supply chain for automotive, of course, obviously goes around the world right now. And we found that out during the pandemic. I don't know exactly what goes back and forth across the border right now. And I don't think we have an accurate measure of just exactly what that is, because that varies from year to year with contract to contract with the various suppliers that are involved. In the case of Mexico, what they always point out or have lately is avocados. Well, I'm not too excited about the price of avocados going up. Yes, it has a very, very small impact on the consumer price index, but it's the major commodities that are a problem. Mexico also is a place where we import a lot of cars now. And we were doing so under the North American Free Trade Agreement and then the revised trade agreement from 4 or 5 years ago or so. And it seemed to be working. Unfortunately, the trade balances got out of whack with both nations. And this is what the president is trying to correct right now. I don't know if this is exactly the way to go about it, but we have to see what's unfolding right here.
So, what can the average consumer do? Is there anything that we can do right now?
Not too much, really. Traditionally, when there's been the threat of any supply chain problem, we have, of course, hoarded. Now, during World War II, they hoarded sugar and flour and all that kind of stuff. But that's certainly not the case with the market the way it is today. If you were going to buy a particular vehicle that was made in Canada, though, and it is on the dealer lot, you might go over and try to make a deal with them right now because future entries to fill that void are going to cost a whole bunch more, assuming, of course, that these tariffs go on. The big problem that I'm worried about is that it is a monkey wrench in the economy right now that we hadn't expected. We've gone quite a ways now without a recession. Again, we average a recession every 6 years since the end of the Second World War. And I hate to think that this is something that would trigger another recession, but the possibility is out there.